People chase results without fixing systems. Why do most people focus on outcomes first? They naturally focus on visible results: better graduates' weight loss, more money, productivity, focus, and relationships. Outcomes are easy to notice because they feel concrete and measurable. But something strange happens when people become obsessed with results. They ignore the systems producing those results. The outcome becomes the entire focus, while the daily structure stays unchanged. That's usually where frustration starts building. Results are often delayed reflections of patterns that already existed long before. What's the difference between goals and systems? Goals describe where someone wants to go. Systems describe what someone repeatedly does every day. People often spend far more time thinking about goals. They neglect the actual structure of their routines. Someone wants better physical health, but sleeps inconsistently and stays stressed. Another wants academic success, but studies without structure, procrastinates heavily, and depends on motivation instead of consistency. The desired result exists mentally, but the supporting system underneath does not fully exist yet. This happens constantly in school. During exam periods, students suddenly want dramatic grade improvements right before major tests. But the daily learning system leading up to the exam stayed unstable for months. Sleep patterns collapse. Stress increases. People search for quick fixes during the final week. This reaction makes sense emotionally because immediate results feel urgent. But the brain and body usually respond more strongly to repeated patterns than short bursts of panic-driven effort. That part feels difficult to accept sometimes because systems are slower and less emotionally exciting than goals. Why do systems feel less motivating initially? Systems often feel boring at first because their effects are gradual. Going to sleep consistently does not create instant transformation. Walking daily does not immediately feel dramatic. Studying 1 hour consistently every day feels less exciting than last-minute intense motivation. But over time, those small repeated actions compound. They compound into larger results quietly. How many people fail not because they lack ambition, but because they underestimate stable systems? Probably more than most people realize. The problem with depending on motivation alone? A lot of people try building their lives around motivation. They wait to feel inspired before acting consistently. But motivation changes constantly based on mood, stress, sleep, and environment. Systems matter because they reduce dependence on emotional fluctuations. You do the behavior because it is part of the routine, not because you suddenly feel perfect mentally that day. That difference becomes extremely important long-term. Real life rarely provides perfect emotional conditions consistently. Why do quick results feel more attractive? Modern culture encourages result-focused thinking constantly. Fast transformations, productivity hacks, rapid self-improvement, immediate visible progress. Social media especially reinforces this because outcomes are easier to display publicly than slow, invisible systems. People post the achievement, not the repetitive routine behind it, so the process itself becomes psychologically undervalued. Honestly, systems rarely look impressive while they are happening. A consistent bedtime routine looks ordinary. Daily studying looks repetitive. Regular movement looks simple. But over time, those ordinary patterns shape results more powerfully. More powerfully than occasional bursts of intensity. The body responds to patterns more than occasional effort. Sleep patterns affect energy regulation. Consistent movement affects circulation and metabolism. Repeated stress affects hormone activity. Small behaviors repeated daily often matter more biologically than isolated intense actions. People sometimes expect one healthy decision to reverse months of unstable patterns. But the body experiences consistency more strongly than occasional effort. That principle applies psychologically. Why do broken systems create repeated frustration? Sometimes people keep chasing the same goals repeatedly. They don't realize the underlying system keeps recreating the same outcome. Someone constantly burns out because their workload system is unsustainable. Someone repeatedly fails to maintain habits because their environment makes consistency difficult. Someone wants mental clarity while living in constant overstimulation and sleep deprivation. The result becomes frustrating partly because the system underneath never actually changed. That's probably why some problems feel strangely repetitive across years. The difference between discipline and system design. People often treat discipline like pure willpower, but environment and system design matter more than most realize. If distractions are constantly accessible, focus becomes harder. If sleep schedules remain unstable, energy regulation becomes harder. If routines depend entirely on emotional motivation, consistency becomes harder. Improving systems reduces the amount of discipline required. The structure itself starts supporting the behavior automatically. Why do small systems quietly change identity? Repeated systems do more than produce outcomes. They slowly shape identity, too. Someone who studies consistently begins seeing themselves differently. Someone who moves regularly starts identifying as active. Small, repeated actions create evidence that changes self-perception gradually. That shift matters because identity often influences future behavior. People tend to repeat behaviors that feel consistent with how they see themselves. The internet made systems harder to notice. Online culture focuses heavily on dramatic moments instead of invisible routines. Before and after transformations, achievements, milestones, breakthroughs, but the repetitive systems underneath rarely receive equal attention because they appear less exciting externally. That creates a distorted perception of improvement. People start wanting visible outcomes without emotionally accepting the slow, repetitive structure required to produce them consistently. Why do simpler systems usually last longer? Complicated systems often collapse faster. Extremely strict routines usually become difficult to maintain under stress. Simpler systems survive longer because they fit more realistically into actual life. Better sleep, more movement, consistent work periods, reduced stable habits, repeated imperfectly but regularly. That simplicity probably matters more than people want it to, because sustainability often beats intensity long term. The part that feels slightly uncomfortable: systems are less emotionally satisfying to think about. They remove the fantasy of instant transformation. They force people to confront repetition, patience, and delayed results. That reality feels less exciting than dramatic motivational thinking, but it also feels more honest. Most meaningful changes happen slowly enough that they feel almost invisible while they are happening. Final thoughts. People often chase results while ignoring the systems producing those results underneath. Goals matter, but stable patterns shape outcomes far more consistently than occasional bursts of motivation. The body and mind respond strongly to repeated behaviors, environments, and routines over time. Once you recognize how much systems quietly control results, it becomes easier to understand why lasting change usually depends less on dramatic ambition and more on a sustainable daily structure. Thanks for watching.